All right, Stephen. I got 1 o'clock on my watch Eastern. Is it okay if I go ahead and kick us off officially?
Stephen, let's do it.
All right. Well, good afternoon if you are on the East Coast, and good morning if you are on the West Coast or somewhere in between. Thanks for being here for today's Bloomerang webinar, Donor Delighting Money Raising Newsletters. Those are the kind of newsletters we want, right? We don't want just plain newsletters. My name is Stephen Shattuck, and I am the Chief Engagement Officer over here at Bloomerang. And I'll be moderating today's discussion as always. And just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Just want to let you all know that we are recording this presentation, and I'll be sending out the recording as well as the slides, a link to the slides later on if you didn't already get those. So if you have to leave early, we'd hate for you to do that, but we understand that sometimes duty calls. So don't worry about it too much. We'll get all that good stuff in your hands later on this afternoon. But most importantly, as you are listening today over the next hour or so, please send us your questions and comments. I'm going to be keeping an eye on those throughout the hour, and we're going to try to save just as much time as we can towards the end of the hour for questions and answers. So don't be shy. Don't sit on those hands. You can even send them over on Twitter. I'll be keeping an eye on the Twitter feed as well. And one last technical note, if you have any trouble with the audio, if you're listening to us from your computer speakers right now and it starts to sound a little garbled or maybe you lose audio, try to dial in by phone. In fact, I would kind of recommend you do that now even if everything's going okay. We find that the phone audio is a lot better. So if you have a phone nearby and don't mind doing that, give it a try. Don't give up on us before you try that. There is a phone number you can use in the email from ReadyTalk that went out around noon Eastern. And if this is your first webinar with us, I just want to say an extra special welcome to you. We do these webinars at Bloomerang basically every Thursday. We did about 45 webinars last year. Got a great schedule going for 2018 already. But what we are most known for, hopefully what we are most known for, is our donor management software. So if you are in the market to switch to a new provider, or maybe looking for your first provider, or maybe just want to know more about Bloomerang, check out our website. Don't do that right now. Wait until the hour has passed to check us out, but we'd love for you to learn more if you are curious. But right now I am super excited to introduce someone I've had a little bit of a crush on. I've been kind of keeping an eye on Stephen, hoping that he would join us for our webinar series, and I was just floored that he said yes. We got Stephen's screen here. Hey Stephen, how's it going?
Hey, great, Stephen. Thank you for having me. The crush is reciprocated.
Oh, thank you. This is a big treat, and you guys are about to find out why. I just want to brag on Stephen really quickly before I turn things over to him. If you don't know Stephen, he's the newsletter guru. He is not a newsletter guru. In my mind, he is the newsletter guru. If you ever have any newsletter questions, please go to Stephen first. He's got over 25 years of experience creating very effective fundraising newsletters, and you're going to get all that knowledge here in just a minute. He is co-founder of Better Fundraising. He is also the host of Fundraising is Beautiful podcast with Jeff Brooks, another hero of mine. Check out that podcast, definitely a good one. And he's also a past winner of the Direct Mail Package of the Year award. I saw Stephen speak at the Nonprofit Storytelling Conference last fall, and I just knew that he had to come on and share all that knowledge with you. You guys are going to enjoy this one. So Stephen, I'm going to hand things off to you to tell us all about newsletters. So take it away, my friend.
Great. Thank you very much. Let me take over and start presenting. Stephen, can you see my screen?
Yeah, it seems to be working good.
Excellent. Okay, so let me sort of do what my 7th grade English teacher taught me, which is sort of tell you what I'm going to tell you, and then tell you, and then tell you what I told you. And so I want to start off sort of how to create a donor-delighting, money-raising, donor-retaining newsletter by giving you a really simple idea. And that first simple idea is that as you're creating your newsletter, it is an exercise in giving credit away. It is an other-centered exercise where you are writing to your donor and telling her the good things that have happened because she gave a gift. It's not so much marketing. It's not so much advertising. It's really true fundraising and giving away the credit. This is hard for lots of organizations to do, but that's the big idea in a nutshell for what we're doing today. And so next I'm going to sort of give you a big idea why newsletters are so important and why they work. And then we're going to get into some tactics, some like how many pages should this thing be, get right into the details and show you examples so that you walk away with this not just with a theory and some ideas, but some examples and some tactics that you can use to make your next newsletter better. So let's get to it. I want to explain as we do this one really big idea first. And I want to walk you through something that we call the Virtuous Circle. And this is going to show you why your newsletter is so important, why it's so important to have one, and why it works so well, why you can be raising money and retaining donors with it. The first thing to talk about is that almost all fundraising interactions start with an ask. Unless you're one of those lucky 3% of organizations where you have a whole bunch of money coming in and you never have to ask for it, almost all of your transactions start out with an ask. And after a donor gives a gift, it's really good to remember this, she feels great. Us humans, us donors, we love to give. We get that hit of dopamine. We feel warm, we feel connected, and that is one of the reasons why so many people are donors. It feels great to give. So, and then just as an aside, never feel like you're having to twist the arm of donors. Never feel like you're bothering them. Always remember in all of your fundraising that donors love to give. But after she gives a gift, she doesn't know what's going to happen. This is a sort of a real key difference here for how a gift is different than a purchase. When you make a purchase, you receive the thing that you purchased, whether it's a phone or a computer or a pair of pants. You know if it's good or not. You know if you like it. But when you make a charitable gift, you don't receive anything other than that hit of dopamine and feeling of connectedness. So you don't know what's going to happen, and you don't really know if your decision to give was a good one. So that's where the thank comes in all of your donor communications. This is why we send thank you notes. This is why we send receipts quickly. It's so that your donor knows that her gift was received and appreciated. Thanking is, by the way, we think it's one of the most opened communications you're ever going to send. So make sure you're doing a great job with your receipts and your thank you notes. But that is for another presentation. Here's the thing I want you to know. She still doesn't know if her gift made a difference or not. She knows that she was appreciated now. She knows that you received her gift now, but she still doesn't know if her gift made a difference. And so that's why we report. A report is a way to show a donor that her gift made a difference. That's what your newsletter is in this sort of virtuous circle, in this theory of fundraising. Your newsletter is a report to your donor to show her how her gift made a difference. It's not, by the way, a report on what your organization has been busy doing. It's on how her gift made a difference. So today we're going to pull that apart and get into how you do that and actually how you can make a lot of money doing that too. Because if you report well, your donor feels great, she trusts your organization, and she's more likely to give again. And so then you can repeat the cycle, and you end up with this. Again, we call this the virtuous circle. If you're asking well and thanking well and reporting well, all kinds of good things happen. You raise more money. Your donors trust you more. We'll get into that a little bit too. And your retention rates go up. All kinds of good stuff happen. But today we're talking about newsletters. Specifically, we're talking about reporting. So I want to just share a couple little ideas here, and then we're going to get into the real deal, the results of the testing of hundreds, maybe thousands of newsletters for hundreds of organizations to see what worked best most of the time. So let's dive in here, and the first thing I want to show you is this graphic, Donors Are Heroes. We made this, and then we're thrilled when Tom Ahern picked it up and included it in his most recent book. what I want to do, well, let's see. This really gets back to the first thing I said, which was a good donor newsletter is an exercise in giving credit away. This is donor-centric fundraising in a nutshell, where we're going to shine our spotlight on the donor to talk about the things that she has done. And it's just really good to remember that, and that is just totally different than the organization as hero narrative that a lot of small to medium size and some large organizations do. But here's what I want you to remember, and this is brand new. I have never shown this before. We just finished this. Donors are heroes, but fundraisers are heroes. We are the folks manning the light. We can choose to point this light at our donor and talk to her, talk to her about what she has done, talk to her about the great things in the world that she has made possible. Or we can choose to shine the light on our organization, our programs, our staff. And I'm here to tell you that the evidence-based conclusion is that if you are shining the spotlight on your donors, talking to them about what they did, you're going to raise more money and keep your donors for longer. And fundraisers, those of us sitting in the fundraising seat, we get to be the heroes here. We get to help our organizations shine this light on our donor, translate the complex work that your organization is doing into ways that are easy for your donor to understand, not because she's not smart, by the way, but because she's moving really fast, supporting lots of other organizations, making it easy for her to see how she can make a difference and has made a difference. So remember, we talk a lot about donors are heroes, but fundraisers, those of us on this call today, we are the heroes getting to choose who is in the spotlight. And you guys, that's an incredibly powerful place to be. And it is a gift to your organization, even if they don't know it, to shine the light on your donors. Okay, I feel like I just gave a sermon. Let's move on into some stuff here. Here's some results from donor-centric newsletters. This is a summary of probably 25 years of work. Revenue from newsletters increase because donors love hearing that their gift made a difference. So if you have a newsletter right now that isn't making money or is only making a little money, if you can make your newsletter donor-centric, as we're talking about today, your newsletter is going to start raising more money every single issue. And then number two, donors give more gifts to future appeals because they know their past giving has made a difference. Now, that's a sort of a secondary benefit, but it is a real measurable effect. And to go back to that virtuous circle here, remember, most organizations are not reporting to their donors. Most donors don't know that their gifts made a difference. So when you share to your donor that her gift made a difference, she loves hearing that because no one else is telling her that. Based on what our clients tell us, about 1 in 5 organizations is doing a good job reporting to their donors. So if you do a good job reporting, your donors are just going to trust you more. They are going to be more likely to give to you again. So your appeal performance is going to go up too. And then finally, your donor retention increases. It's fun to talk about that because donor retention is so core to what Bloomerang is doing in terms of measuring this and focusing on it. But if you do a good donor-focused newsletter, your donor retention is going to increase. And you're going to raise a lot more money over time. To use the analogy that many of us have heard before, this makes your donor bucket, less leaky. And when you do that, your organization just starts growing faster and faster. So hopefully all of this is sort of selling you on the idea of why a newsletter is important and why it works so well. Donors are starving to know that their gifts made a difference. And if you do that in a way that really makes sense to them, that really moves their heart, all kinds of good fundraising things are going to happen. So let's get into some tactical details. And by the way, Stephen, feel free to interrupt me at any time with any questions that are coming in. This is a summary of a whole lot of research and testing. And what I'm about to give you is what I would call our default setting for newsletters. Not every newsletter needs to be like this. You can be successful using other ways. But if someone said, hey, Stephen, make a newsletter, this is what I would do. And so I share that with you because most likely it's your best course of action. Number one, it arrives in an envelope. So it's not a self-mailer. And let me share some data with you from a test that I was a part of. We sent the same newsletter to an organization's donors. For half the donors, we put it in an envelope, and for half the donors, we put it in a self-mailer. And we measured the response rate. The response rate for the envelopes, for the newsletters that went in an envelope was 2.7%. The response rate for the newsletters that went out as a self-mailer was 1%. So 2.7% for in an envelope versus 1% in the self-mailer. Yes, an envelope is more expensive, but it is absolutely worth it for you to put your newsletter in an envelope. The basic theory is it seems more important and is more likely to get read if you put it in an envelope. By the way, the average gift for the versions of the newsletter that went out in the envelope was about 15 or 16 bucks higher than the average gift for the self-mailers too. So not only did the response rate go up, but the average gift went up as well. Okay, next. 4 pages or less. 4 pages is about the right amount. We usually use what's called a tabloid-sized sheet of paper. That's 11 by 17. I blanked on the sides there. And it's folded in half to create a 4-page newsletter. It can be longer. We're seeing some success with 2-page newsletters, but generally speaking, 4 pages seems to be about the sweet spot for cost versus expense versus revenue. Next, 3 beneficiary stories written in the past tense. So you can have 4, you can have 5, you can have 2 really good ones, but generally speaking, we do 3 beneficiary stories where we're sharing stories about people that your organization has helped in some way. And if your organization doesn't help people, then you're still trying to figure out who your beneficiary is and telling stories about that cause or that meadow or that arts program. There are lots of different ways to do it, but you're looking for 3 stories, and then you're writing them in the past tense. You are reporting back on things that have already happened. This gets back to the idea in the Virtuous Circle of closing the loop. Trying to let donors know that their gift arrived, that it was really appreciated, that their gift made a difference, and here's evidence that their gift made a difference. And then when you ask them again, you have closed the loop. The donor knows that you have received their gift, that their gift made a difference, and that you're now asking them to do another thing, not more of the same thing. And that's a really big difference. So trying to, for instance, don't take all headlines that end with the letters ing out of your newsletter, because that's all present tense. That's all these things are happening now, and you want to be reporting back on things that have already happened, closing the loop with your donors and letting them know great things that happened because they gave a gift. Okay, there's a lot of information fast, but you're going to get a copy of this thing. 2 protagonists in every single story. First protagonist is the beneficiary, and the second protagonist is your donor. In most of the newsletters that I review, the article is about the first protagonist is the organization. It's about what the organization has been doing, and the second protagonist is the beneficiary, and the donor is maybe mentioned, maybe at the end of the article. And I'll talk about why that's a bad idea later on. But every single article should be about a beneficiary and a donor. You don't need to talk about your organization in your newsletter because your donor knows that the newsletter is from your organization. You don't need to beat her over the head with it. You just need to talk to her about what she did, right? That's the whole goal of this thing, giving credit away to donors for things they did, shining a light on them, not so much on the organization. Okay, 1 reader. Great pattern recognition here, right? 4, 3, 2, 1, one reader. Write your newsletter as if you are writing to one person. So you don't want to say, all of you are doing this amazing thing, or your editorial perspective is that this is a message to one person. So lots of the word you. You want her to sit down and feel like the newsletter is for her, not for all your donors. And the sort of pithy way to say this is when you write, if a donor sits down and she realizes that the newsletter is to everyone, that means that the newsletter is not to her, right? If it's to everyone, that means it's not to you. It's for everyone. So you really want to write to her. Use the word you all the time. Say things like, thanks to you, Mary was rescued and is now in the shelter. All kinds of examples like that. But just remember, one reader. Don't write to everyone. Write to one person. A couple other details here. Lots of photos. Humans love photos, specifically of other humans and faces. So have a lot of photos. It's not always possible to do this. Some organizations struggle because they can't show their beneficiaries. So in that case, you want to use stock photography. You want to use illustrations. You want to paint word pictures instead of photos. But as much as you can, try to be photo heavy. And generally speaking, this is a recommendation that I'm not super firm about, but generally speaking, we go away from glossy paper. Over the years, we've had more success with matte or flat papers. They just don't look as slick. And to donors, the general theory is they feel more real, and it feels more like direct reporting than marketing or advertising from an organization. So we default to not glossy paper. Include a reply card and an envelope. In your newsletter, you absolutely want to include a reply card and a reply envelope for a couple of reasons, but one of the main ones is that many of your donors will be so thrilled to hear that their gift made a big difference that they, especially when they haven't heard that from the other organizations they're donating to, they will want to send you a gift right now, and you want to make it as easy as possible for them to do that. So we recommend including a reply card and a reply envelope in every single newsletter you send. And I have some more data here to share. This is from another test that we did. We sent the same newsletter out. And by the way, I'm going to show you samples of all these things in a couple minutes. But we sent the same newsletter out. One of them had a reply device and a reply envelope. And one of them did not have a reply device and a reply envelope. So again, so same exact newsletter to the same number of donors randomly selected. Some got a reply envelope and a reply card, and some didn't. The response rate for the group that got a reply card and a reply envelope was 3.4%. The response rate for the folks who did not get a reply card and a reply envelope was 1.4%. So a full 2 points higher if you include a reply card and reply envelope in this test, and this test is representative of all the times I've ever tested this. It is absolutely worth your time and money to include a reply card and a reply envelope. So, and then just, by the way, the version that included the reply card and reply envelope raised 111% more than the version that didn't. So if you're not doing these things now, this is a relatively easy way to get started. Finally, you're going to hear me say this a lot, but remember that the donor is the hero. As you're writing this, think about it as sort of, to go into a journalistic way of talking about it. Think about your editorial perspective. Your editorial perspective is not that this is a newspaper. It's not that it's marketing or advertising for your organization. It's not that you're sharing all the good stuff that your organization has been doing with the assumption that then your donor will donate more. What it is that it is a love letter to your donors sharing real stories of lives that she has changed. That's your job. That's the job of a newsletter. And if you do that well, all kinds of good stuff are going to happen. And I will also tell you that it's really hard to do that well. because there are lots of other voices in your organization saying things like, hey, but we have an event coming up, we should mention that. And hey, we just got a big check from a foundation, we should mention that. And generally speaking, I try to keep as much of that stuff out of the newsletters as possible because of all the testing done over the years where anything we included in the newsletter reduced response and money. The one thing I'll tell you, and this is fun, I've had to change my position on this. I used to never want to talk in newsletters about legacy giving programs. And now we're finding that if you mention some sort of legacy giving program and give the donor a person a call, that does not decrease, if you do it right, that does not decrease the response and money raised, and you will get some people who will sign up for your legacy giving program. So that's fun. That's a recommendation that I had to change because of testing results that have happened recently. Okay, let's look at a couple other things, a couple other big ideas before I show you some samples. Number one, this is fun. Reporting is different than bragging. Most organizations in their newsletters or in their e-news are doing more bragging than reporting. So again, what you want to be doing is tell your donors what their gift accomplished. You want to tell her what she did, not what your organization did. I know that I'm repeating this a couple times, but this tends to be the biggest idea that folks have a hard time wrapping their mind around. You want to be talking about what she did, not what your organization did. Back in the Virtuous Circle there, you saw ask, thank, report, repeat, which is a fundraising rhythm of communications that we, I wouldn't say we developed, but we kind of codified it, and that's what we follow. And most organizations ask, thank, brag, repeat, or they ask, thank, ask, repeat. And I'm here to tell you today that those rhythms don't work as well as ask, thanking, and reporting. Okay, a couple other big ideas. Reporting with your newsletter. Over the last 50 or so years, maybe 60 or 70, in direct mail fundraising, the role of the newsletter, generally speaking, has been reporting. That's what newsletters are really, really good at. You should, if you're with us today and you don't have a printed newsletter, you should. If you have there are, we could go into lots of details, but generally speaking, you should have a printed newsletter. A couple other big ideas in here. In your newsletter, you want to be sharing stories, not statistics. So we did multiple tests where we took newsletters and we would replace certain stories with statistic-based articles rather than beneficiary-based articles. And in general, anytime we led off with a statistic, like 1 in 9 kids will never go to the opera in our town, or 3,300 children are dying in Africa each day of preventable causes. Anytime you do something like that, results went down. And the general belief there is that statistics are loved by and make sense to experts, and your organization is an expert. But most donors who are moving fast, they see the numbers and they sort of gloss over them and look for something else to read. But if you share really good stories about people or your cause or whatever it is you're working on, not statistics, you'll raise more money. The next idea I want to share here is that donors fund outcomes, not processes. This is probably the most important lesson I ever learned in fundraising. I learned it in my first couple months on the job back in, this would be 1993. Most organizations want to talk about their processes, how they do the work. But most donors are involved because they want to save the meadow or teach the kid math or any sort of outcome. So what does that mean about your fundraising? It means that your fundraising should be mostly about the outcomes, not the processes. Now, are there some major donors who love your process, really understand it, and realize that's how you add value? Absolutely. Are there some foundations that have the same, we call it a high organizational IQ? Absolutely. But for most donors, most of the time, especially in your newsletter, talk about outcomes, not processes. So talk about the lives you changed, not how your programs changed the lives. That'll really really ratchet your reporting up to 11. And the final thing here before we jump into some samples and some more tactics is to tell the before and the after. The best analogy I use to explain this is weight loss commercials. If you only saw the after in weight loss commercials, you would think that they just went down to the local modeling agency and grabbed some people and shot them. But it's the contrast of the people today versus how they were 6 months ago or a year ago that makes you think, oh, wow, that really works. And it's the same thing in fundraising, in reporting. So you want to share the tough situation, the meadow that had oil running down the stream, the person who was homeless in a tough situation, the child who was hungry, the county that had no presence of the arts or music, right? Share that darkness, share that before, because the donor doesn't really remember it. And then you tell them the after, then you share the light, then you share the triumph. That contrast between the before and the after is going to help your donors see how powerful their gifts are. And when they see how powerful your gifts are, they're way, way more likely not only to give you another gift right now, but to give you another gift down the road the next time you ask them. So share the before and the after. Be brave. Okay, more tactics. Here we have an example newsletter, and I want to share some sort of design principles, so how we think about some things. Number one, the donor should be able to see what their gift did in under 5 seconds. This is getting into the heart of a mistake that almost every nonprofit makes. It's a terrible mistake, and that is assuming that your fundraising is going to be read. Most organizations send out and they assume that donors are going to read it, and you guys are not going to read it. They're going to scan it, and they're going to give it a quick blip over that takes about 5 seconds, more plus or minus, and they're going to look for something that hopefully catches their attention. So make sure, using tactics that we're about to talk about, that in 5 seconds she can see what her gift did. By the way, if this is a sort of a new piece of idea, new idea that donors scan things, not read things, go look at any of the eye tracking studies that were done, specifically by the German guy with the best name ever, Siegfried von Vögele, who did some foundational research for how to make. Let me rephrase that, for what made successful direct mail work. And one of the things is designed so that scanners can see what is either their gift did or what is being asked of them today. So 5-second test. Number 2, it's got to be really, really easy to read. Make sure that your text is large and easy to read. If you have a designer who is 25 years old and loves their sans serif fonts and their super fancy monitor, and reverse text, which is white text on a dark colored background, you're in trouble because that's really hard for donors to read. It has to be easy to read because nobody has to read your fundraising, right? They can set it down and life will keep going on. You have to make it really easy to read because readability is directly related to fundraising results. Again, make this about what the donor did, not what the organization did. So let's talk about a couple of things here. So zoom in. It is obvious what my gift did, right? Blind baby girl can see. I even have photographic evidence right here up in the masthead. A couple other things. The most read parts of any newsletter you send are the headlines, the picture captions, and the first paragraph. So what does that mean? It means that you need to work really, really hard at making your headlines, picture captions, and your first paragraph tell the donor that she did some amazing things. And I would say that this newsletter did a really good job. Right, the headline, Blind Baby Girl Can See. That first picture caption at the bottom, Mayuri holding her baby daughter, Shreya. Shreya was born blind, but thanks to your help, she can see. Right? In the first paragraph, baby Shreya was born blind, but she can see today thanks to you. Most organizations, by the way, save a paragraph like that for the last paragraph in your story. The last paragraph in your story is one of the least read paragraphs in your story. But this is the most important idea for you to be communicating. So you want to take that most important idea and give it its due. Put it right up front. Put it in multiple times, because nobody reads the whole thing except for your board and your program folks and maybe your mom. You want to make it so easy for them to look at this in just a few seconds and know what their gift did. Is it overly simplistic? Absolutely. But that's where I would start, and then in the story pull apart how their gift made such a big deal and why that's so important. But start simple and powerful, and then get some, and then go into the depth. Don't make the mistake most organizations make, is write really complex stories that the donor has to read the whole thing to understand. This is the part of fundraising that fundraisers get to do, which is translate complex stories and translate problems, complex problems of relief and development, community development, all kinds of stuff, into super simple ways that donors can understand that their gift made a difference, and then get into the complexities. But start simple. Another thing to mention are pull quotes. This is not as important as the other things that I mentioned, but pulling out a quote, you see this in magazines all the time, that you really want your donor to read, is another way to give her eye something to catch on as she's looking through your newsletter. This is way down in the nerdery here, but what you're looking for is called multiple visual points of entry. Your donor is scanning this thing, and you want her to land on the most important stuff. So you highlight things by using headlines, picture captions, pull quotes, and ideally you can, in a few seconds, give her a super simple explanation of what her gift did. By the way, let me pull something apart for just a second. I'm using the female pronoun she and her to talk about your donor because in North America, most donors are females, and most giving decisions in couples are made by females. So as you're writing your newsletter and all your fundraising, and you're writing it to one person, remember that the vast majority of the time that person is female. So if that helps you do your writing to write to her more accurately, use that, but picture a female in your mind. And then also remember that the average donor in the United States is about 69 years old. That's one of the reasons, by the way, why you want to use big type, so that it's easy for that 69-year-old donor to read. Those are the types of things you should know as you design this thing and as you write this thing. Okay, let's take a look at another example. And by the way, there's a question I'm sure many of you are asking, which is, wait a minute, my organization doesn't do something where it is as easy to talk about what happened, where it is as easy to show results. I'm showing examples like these because it is the easiest way to communicate the principles that I'm trying to share with you. But what you want to be doing is looking for ways to oversimplify what you do and personalize what you do. It's harder, right? It is harder to do that about a meadow or teaching math to junior high students, but you can do it. You want to use this thinking and do your best. Just as an example, this is slightly off topic, but we worked with one organization that was the Center for Wooden Boats, and so we had one of the wooden boats write the letter to their donors, and it worked like crazy, right? That is a personalization, humanization of the main beneficiary. So take that principle and apply it to what it is that you're working on. Okay, let's get back into some real tactics here. Again, we're speaking to the donor about what their gifts have done. So look at this really big super header across the top. You have the power. Your gifts are multiplied to send urgent help, right? That's about the donor. The donor can read this thing and know, wow, I make a big difference. And they'll know in this case that their gifts are multiplied to send urgent help, right? That's about the donor. It's not about your organization. We have outcome-oriented headlines, right? Donors fund outcomes, not processes. So it's rare epilepsy treated, not our disease team did its job in this country, right? A fragile life saved. It's about this little kid whose life was saved, not about how the organization did. A couple other things here. Every main picture has a caption. I shouldn't say most, too many nonprofit donor newsletters don't have picture captions. And you should, because the eye tracking studies show that people read picture captions. It's one of the most important pieces of real estate in your newsletter. Excuse me. And by the way, let me share my general rule of thumb about nonprofit newsletter picture captions. The caption should not be about what's happening in the photo, which is counterintuitive, but here's where it lands. The caption should be about the donor's role in what is happening in the photo. So if you look at the one on the right here, it's the best example of this. You help supply supplements for babies whose health is at risk, right? So that's not so much about the baby, it's about the donor's role. So every main picture has a caption, and then always have an offer. You always want to give your donors the opportunity to give again. You always want them to know what their next gift will accomplish. And so in every newsletter that we do, we try to know exactly what offer we're talking about, what the donors, which is a fancy way of saying what the donor's next gift will accomplish with a specific outcome and a specific dollar amount. That is a really big, it's a hornet's nest for some organizations, but you want to make it clear what your donor's next gift will do, because many people reading about the great things that they have done will want to do more of that with you. Okay, we're moving through the newsletter. We're coming to the back page. And the back page is where we take a whole bunch of reporting goodwill that we just developed and can turn it into action. So here's our default setting. Again, lots of newsletters are different, but here's our default setting. Is on the back page of your newsletter, you should have some current need that your donor can meet. This is a newsletter that was all about water, and and there was one drought that was happening then. So we talked about that drought on the back page of the newsletter. There's a clear evidence of need. There is an obvious offer. It costs just $20 to provide clean, disease-free water to a family, and your gift multiplies 3 times. So on the back of the newsletter, and the thinking here is you've just done 3 pages of generous, donor-focused reporting. You have given the credit away. You have proven to her that her gifts were needed, and you have proven to her that her gifts made a difference. And because your organization is still doing work right now, because your organization, because not every donor opens every piece of mail, you still want her to know that there is a need out there and that she can choose to help today. And a lot of people will if you do this right. So there's a clear way to take action. On the bottom of the back page, we do something that we call a faux reply device. When we started doing that, response rates to newsletters went up between 15 and 20%. So, and we think what it is we are reminding donors that there's an easy way that they can make a difference today. We've just proven to them that their gift works. And now here's an easy way for them to do something else today. And so that's our default setting on the back page of all our newsletters. We do this faux reply device, and then we include a real reply device in the letter with it. A couple things to note. the best newsletters, in our experience, are all about one part of what your organization does. It's not, it's 3 stories about one program, and then the offer is to help that program or the beneficiaries of that program, not one story about one program, one story about another program, and one story about another program. Another way of saying this is that your newsletters are themed, and you hit multiple themes during the year, but generally speaking, you only talk about one theme in each newsletter. That requires lots of discipline, but if you do it, your results will go up. The other thing I want to mention here is you'll notice the similarity in language between that faux reply device and in the red on the lower left, yes, I'll bring clean, safe water, and on the real reply device, yes, I'll bring clean, safe water. You want those things to look as close to exactly the same as you can, and that repetition there is a really good thing. Many organizations will change up what's happening on these 2 things, and that generally reduces response. What you want to do is say the same thing, right? Ford will play the same car commercials 4 times during the first half of the soccer game or football game or the Olympics. Why are they doing that? They're doing that because they know repetition works. You should apply the same principle in your nonprofit fundraising. That repetition works, and it helps organizations really feel like you're only talking to them about one powerful, important thing, not all the things, which is what most organizations do accidentally. So that's the back page. We've talked through the big ideas. We've talked through the design and the tactics. We've talked about how there are other ways to do this, but also about how this is our default setting. It's what we do. It works really, really well for most of the organizations that we do it for. That's reporting in the mail in a nutshell, right? If you're doing a really good job here, in just a few seconds, your donor is going to see how her gift made a difference. And when she does that, do you see why that's so important? Because she doesn't know that her gift made a difference. And do you see why that's so powerful, how you can raise a bunch of money right now by showing her, especially when the other organizations are not showing her. And then when you do that, all these good things happen, right? You raise money from your newsletters. You raise more money from your future appeal letters because your donors trust you. And then you have retained more of your donors, so your bucket becomes less leaky, and you raise more money over time. Raising retention, right? Bloomerang will tell you this. It's like compound interest. You keep doing that every year, and all of a sudden you are raising more money than you ever expected just a couple years previous. So she feels great. She trusts your organization. She's more likely to give again. That's the power of a really great donor-centered newsletter. And that is the presentation. So thank you very much for listening. That was a whole lot of information really fast. But Stephen, any questions or any questions I can answer?
Oh my goodness, that was my pen is broken from taking notes. This is crazy good. I knew it would be. And yes, we have some questions. We have more questions than I can ever remember seeing in a webinar, which is fitting because you're the king of the Bloomerang webinars. This is our highest attended and registered for, if that's a term, webinar ever. So thank you, Stephen. This is awesome information. We got a lot of good questions. I'm going to try to get to as many as possible. But real quick, how can people get in touch with you, Stephen? Visit your website, follow you on Twitter. What's the best way?
Yeah. So at Stephen Screen on Twitter, Stephen with a V, screen just like your computer screen. We're at betterfundraising.com. We have a blog that's fun, and we try to put out a couple of really good pieces of content per week. And the other thing
yes.
people can do is we have a free ebook. We have a free ebook on storytelling. We call it Storytelling for Action. It's what I'll be presenting on at AFP in New Orleans in a couple of months. And that has helped a lot of organizations sort of think about how they tell stories, treating stories as sort of a defined tactic that you can use for how and when you tell which types of stories, rather than just looking at storytelling as this sort of magic organic unicorn that works, right? So anyway, free ebook on our website.
Yeah, go get that. I just chatted the link in the chat, of course. So go get that, and then you'll get on Stephen's list, and you'll get all the goodies from him. Okay, so you did indeed, Stephen, anticipate one of the most common questions about, what if our org doesn't necessarily have something that we can illustrate the before for the after. So I'm glad you touched on that. I want to ask another question, though, that a lot of people were asking. Email newsletters. Do all of these concepts apply to a digital newsletter? The things you said for your print newsletter. Any insights on that email newsletter?
Yeah. So let's see. I'm going to share our experience. I'm also going to say that there are lots of different ways to skin this cat. But in our experience, e-newsletters, generally speaking, don't work. And we are now advising our clients. And again, this is just our perspective, but we're now advising our clients not to do them, but to instead. But you still need to report, right? So instead, we send out, ideally monthly, but not everyone can do that. Ideally monthly, a very personal sounding email from your executive director, stripped of as much formatting as you can, that tells one beneficiary story and gives the credit to the donor. And that is, and there is a subtle link at the bottom if the donor would like to help more people now. That's how we're seeing engagement go up and retention go up. But to my mind, to my experience, I should say, very few organizations are raising money with their e-newsletter that don't have email lists of 100,000 people. And so it's
right.
And the open rates tend to get really low, in part because it's usually just a grab bag of stuff. So it's for everyone, and that means it's for no one.
Yep.
I would love to be wrong. I would love to hear someone who is making that work, but I have not run into that. My podcasting partner Jeff Brooks hasn't run into that. I'd love to hear from someone because we want to get better at that. That's where things are going. The mail is still dominant right now, but personal newsletter, a personal email from the executive director with one story, giving all the credit to the donor.
I love it. And then still do your print newsletter that is the more substantial piece and all the things you said today. So kind of companion.
Absolutely.
I like it. Give it a try, folks. Give it a try. Okay, speaking of audiences, a lot of people asked a variation of this question, which is, should you have versions of these newsletters for different audiences? And the kinds of audiences people mentioned were, non-donors versus current donors. Either they're lapsed or they've never given and you want them to give their first gift. Volunteers versus donors. Is there any credence to segmenting your newsletter and having different versions, or should you just send that one to everyone? What do you think?
Great question, and this is a complex answer that I'm going to try to simplify. But I would only send your donor-centric newsletter to donors who have given a gift in either the past 18 months or 24 months. I would not spend the money to send it to volunteers. I would not spend the money to send it to non-donors, because newsletters are, in my experience, a lousy vehicle for getting a non-donor to give a gift. I would be sending them when you're trying to acquire a new donor, you want to send them an appeal, not a newsletter. Should you have different versions of those things? Yeah, if you have the money and the human resources to do different versions, yes. But and again, right, I'm having to sort of take a complex situation and distill it down to the gravy.
Sure.
But the most important thing you can do is retain your donors. So you want to write a newsletter that is only to your donors and send it only to your donors. And when you're having success there and you have more time and money, great, then start talking to your other audiences.
I You're speaking my language.
Yeah, I've watched you talk. I've watched you talk, Stephen, about segmentation before, so I knew that we were singing on the same song sheet.
One of my favorites. Okay.
Yep.
So getting to the nitty-gritty, lots of questions came in when you were talking about the reply card and the reply device, and you were on a roll. I didn't want to interrupt you, but lots of people were asking about, should it be stamped, pre-stamped? Should it be kind of a tearaway, kind of a BRE type thing? Anything tactical in terms of what that reply card or what that reply device should look like?
Mm-hmm. In a perfect world, the reply device is customized with the donor's name and address, with a motivation code for that mailing, and customized gift amounts based on how much they have given in the past. That's sort of the best practices. And those gift amounts, the ask amounts are based on the offer. So if you're saying it costs $44 to send a kid to arts camp, you want your asks to be $44, $88, and $122. That's bad at math on demand. I'm a copywriter, Stephen, I'm a math person. So make it customized to that thing. Don't do the same reply card or the same reply envelope that often is a bangtail, right? It's got that fold-over top where the donor has to write in their information. They have to pick their gift amount from 10, 15, 25, 50, 150, 250, 500, 1,000, right? Those are proven to reduce your response rates. They're proven to sort of save you money in the short term and lose you lots of money in the long term. The two other really quick things to mention. Number one, in some cases, for some major donors, I would put a stamp on the reply envelope. But usually we use a business reply envelope or just a CRE. And then the other thing is we often, I should have mentioned this somewhere, but we often use newsletters to report back to major donors. But instead of sending it out in a number 10 envelope, we have some held from the printer, and we hand stuff them into 9x12 envelopes with a little cover letter from the executive director. And that is a great way to turn what can feel like just a regular old newsletter into a handcrafted report for a major donor who is then much more likely to open it and read it. So that's a great way to sort of get two things for the price of one with a little bit of extra work.
I like it. A little segmentation in kind of the delivery device, not necessarily the content. That's a good idea. Love it. Yeah, and I would add we've seen Bloomerang customers have success with kind of those weird suggested gift amounts, not the ones that end in 0, but end in 7s and 3s and something kind of weird. So I'd definitely recommend that. Frequency. How often? Is this quarterly, monthly, annual? Does it depend? Lots of people are wondering about frequency, Stephen.
Yeah. So another great question that's complex because it depends on the organization and how much money you're raising per newsletter. But generally, I would have at least a year. Because not everybody opens every piece of mail. So if you only have one, maybe half the people opened it. So I would try to do 3 a year and move up to quarterly. One specific tip: don't do it in November or December. That's when you want to be asking, not reporting. So if you currently have a November newsletter, move it earlier in the year and replace that newsletter with an appeal, and that appeal will do better. But yeah, I mean, I've been part of organizations that have moved up to 12 newsletters a year, one a month, and they did that because they were raising more money and retaining more donors every time they added one. So, but at least a couple times a year.
I love it. Boy, we are about out of time. I tried to get to the most common question themes, and you nailed all of them, even though I put you on the spot and kind of generalized the questions. But Stephen, I'll give you one more chance for a plug. I'm gonna send that storytelling ebook out in the chat. But how can people get in touch with you if we didn't quite get to their individual question?
Well, I'm going to do something dangerous, which is
Go for it. I like
email
dangerous.
me.
Whoa.
Yep. You can email me at Stephen@betterfundraising.com, and I'll do my best to get back to you if you have a specific question. But I'm happy to dialogue on Twitter too.
Yeah, send him a tweet. And if you're going to AFP in New Orleans, look for him. Tackle him in the hallway and tell him you were on the Bloomerang webinar. That was really awesome. And Stephen, I guess I'll see you there as well. I might talk to you myself.
That'd be great, and can't wait to have you on the Fundraising is Beautiful podcast.
Yeah, that'll be fun. This was awesome. This, I think, is going to be our definitive newsletter webinar. So thanks so much, Stephen, for hanging out with us and sharing all this knowledge. This was really fun.
Yeah, my pleasure, and for the folks listening, thank you for doing what you're doing, right? You're on the front lines translating complex problems into ways that a donor who gives you a few seconds of attention can take action and make the world a better place. That's a noble, awesome job, and it's hard, and it's great, and I'm with you. Thanks for letting me share this stuff.
Yeah, thank you all. You guys are awesome. We got some great webinars coming up. I'm taking next Thursday off. I hope you don't mind. We've been doing one a week since the first of the year, but we are going to be back in 2 weeks with Pamela Grow, another one of my favorites. She's going to talk about development systems. You want to know what that is? You got to come and listen in. It's going to be a good one. Pamela's awesome. Totally free, 1 p.m. Eastern, 2 weeks from today. And we got some other webinars that you can check out, you can register for well into the summer as well. But we'll call it a day there. I know we went a little over, but thanks for hanging out with us. Definitely worth it. Look for an email from me with the recording so you can dive deeper into all those goodies. I'll be sending that out this afternoon. So hopefully we'll see you in a couple weeks. If not, some Thursday after that. So have a good rest of your Thursday. Have a safe weekend. Stay warm, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye now.